Right, Shalom, Mashallah. Minister of Souls by giving no praise to Yahweh, Shem, Yahweh, Shem, Mukawadash, the belongs to the apostles of GMS and honors T-Bros doing work in truth, while sincerity. I was at the camp yesterday and we was, speaking on the Israelites that were living abroad in different countries, for whatever reason, whether it was Corinth, Ephesus, Rome, right? But they were still Israelites, right? And, through the Spirit, I just mentioned the term expatriate. For example, you have, in England, when you hear of expat, you generally think of like an older English person that has moved to Spain to live in Spain, right? But they're still considered an English person, right? When the British government is basically saying, do X, Y, Z, right? And he's setting up a polling station. For instance, here you see in the picture, and the caption says expatriate French voters queue in Lausanne, Switzerland for the first round of the presidential election of 2007. Right now, if this billboard here was to say, hey, all voters come in, right? This is for a French election and only French citizens are eligible for that vote, right? And the Swiss citizens would understand this, right? Just like how back in the day when, the times of when Paul's writing those letters to the Romans, it was to the Israelites living in Rome, right? Because they were the ones that mattered, in that particular context, right? So it says an expatriate, often shortened to expat, is a person residing in a country other than their native country. Right, in common usage, the term often refers to professional skilled workers or artists taking positions outside their home country, either independently or sent abroad by their employers, which can be companies, universities, governments, or non-governmental organizations. Effectively, migrant workers, they usually earn more than they would at home and less than local employees. However, the term expat is also used for retirees and others who have chosen to live outside their native country. Historically, it also referred to exiles. When you read this article, basically, goes into the difference, between expat, migrant, and immigrant, right? And from what you call it? It says these contrast with the definitions of other words with similar meanings. So it's got similar meanings, right? It says the varying use of these terms for different groups of foreigners can thus be seen as implying nuances about wealth, intended length of stay, perceived motives for moving, nationality, and even race, right? But like I said, I'm only highlighting this word here just as a bringing it to modern terms, really, of some of the statements that are going on there back, in the scriptures. You might call them Gentiles. Right nowadays, we might call them an immigrant or migrant or an expat, right? It says expatriate in the etymology dictionary. It says modeled on French expatriate, banish, from ex, out of, and patriae, native land, so out of your native land. Right, you're a foreigner, right? A Gentile, right? And obviously you got two types of Gentiles. You got Gentiles, which are referring to Israelite foreigners. Then you've got the Gentiles, which is referring to the actual heathen, right? But that's where you have to have that understanding of the scriptures to know what's what and what it's actually talking about, right? If it's talking about salvation to the Gentiles, then it's talking about Israelite foreigners. If it's talking about destruction to the Gentiles, then, it's talking about these heathens, right? This is James 1:1. This is James, a servant of the Most High and of the Lord Yahweh Shai Bashiach, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. Right, so James, who's a servant of the Most High, is basically saying hello to the Israelites that are scattered abroad, right? To the Israelites that have migrated from Israel into other lands, right? To the Israelites that have become expatriated, right? Ex meaning out, patria meaning father, so basically out of their fatherland, right? And I'm not using that in the term to banish, because as we read in the in the etymology, right, that's one of the meanings. That's the meaning of expatriate, right? Someone who's basically been banished, right? But once again, I'm just using terms, right, that are modern day, right? So that we can also remember that the things that that are happening now, they were happening back then. People were moving from one place to another for different reasons, right? This is Acts 11:19. This is, and they which were scattered abroad upon the persecution that arose about Stephen. And this is another example of why people might migrate, because of persecution, right? For instance, you got people leaving Syria, right, migrating over here, right, because their homeland is fucked, right? But this is an example where it was what do you call it? Israelites were migrating, right? I says, now they which were scattered abroad upon the persecution arose about Stephen travelled as far as Phoenice, Cyprus, and Antioch, preaching the word to none but unto the Jews only, right? So you see, they after what happened to Stephen, right? You had the Israelites that that left, and they went far and wide, right? So Acts 18:2 says, and found a certain Jew. I'll start from once. And after these things, Paul departed from Athens and came to Corinth. So here it is. Paul is going from one Greek place to another Greek place, right? So if he's doing that, what makes you? So if it Israelite is going from one to the other, what makes you think that they want other Israelites that had done the same, right? It says, and found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately come from Italy, with his wife Priscilla, because that Claudius had commanded all Jews to depart from Rome, and came unto them. So you basically that's proof that you had Jews living in Rome, right? And once again, we go and see this, these race wars where people are going to start returning home. You read that in Isaiah 13 or 14. It speaks about shall be as a chaste road that no man taketh up. Every man shall flee to his own country, right? In the next verse after that first bit, I just mix two scriptures together, right? But it's both in one verse after the other, right? It says, there shall every man turn to his own people, and everyone flee to their own land. So I didn't misquote that. Right? So everyone's going to start fleeing to their own land. Why? But that's proven that you have people that are in other lands that have migrated, that have become expatriates, right? That has just proved that you had Jews living in other lands. Once again, right? This is Acts 2:5, right? It says, and there were men, and they were dwelling at Jerusalem, Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. Once again, you had Jews, right, living in all these different nations, right? I'll jump down. Verse 8 says, and how hear we every man in our own tongue wherein we were born, right? It says Parthians and Medes and Elamites and the dwellers of Mesopotamia and in Judea and Cappadocia and Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia and Egypt and in the parts of Libya about Cyrene, and strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes, Cretes and Arabians, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of the Most High, right? So basically what happened here, right, you had the miracle where the the apostles were basically given the ability to speak in different languages, right? And the Israelite foreigners that were from all of these different lands, this is basically saying they were all living here, right, were able to understand what it was they were saying, right? Once again, proving you had the Israelites that had left out of their own country, right? Sort of like, if which is, it's difficult to give this example because English is what they call the lingua franca, which is the language of commerce, right? But sort of like if you're an English expat living in Spain, and you're walking past, in a village, and then you start hearing someone speaking English, you stop, you look around, you be like, yo, what's going on here? Yeah, who's this guy? Right? How does he speak my language? Whatever, what have you, right? This is Isaiah 11:11. It says, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. Right? So Israelites are going to be scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Right? In fact, it goes on to say that it says, and he shall set up an ensign for the nation, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Right? It says Ezekiel 36:19. It says, and I scattered them among the heathen. Right? So one of the curses you read, Deuteronomy 28:64, Israel will be scattered among the heathen. Right? So they'll be looking at all the heathen that they're round about. It says, and they were dispersed through the countries according to their way, and according to their doings I judged them. Right, so Israel was scattered throughout the nations, throughout the countries, throughout the people. So as always, Lord's Lord, that was edifying. Till the next time, Shalom.